The Great Depression. These two words evoke images of breadlines, Dust Bowl storms, and families struggling to survive. It was a period marked by widespread poverty and a sense of hopelessness that permeated every corner of society. It was a time of immense hardship, the likes of which the world had never seen. The economic collapse was swift and brutal, leaving no one untouched. From 1929 to the late 1930s, the global economy went into a tailspin. Stock markets crashed, banks failed, and international trade came to a grinding halt. Millions lost their jobs, homes, and life savings. The unemployment rate soared to unprecedented levels, and many found themselves destitute, with no means to support their families. The United States, once a symbol of prosperity, was hit particularly hard. The American dream seemed to vanish overnight, replaced by a harsh reality of scarcity and struggle. The Great Depression was not merely an economic downturn. It was a profound crisis that affected every aspect of life. It was a social and cultural earthquake that shook the very foundations of society. Traditional values and norms were challenged as people grappled with their new reality. It tested the resilience of the human spirit and forced people to confront their deepest fears and insecurities. Despite the overwhelming adversity, many found ways to persevere. Yet, from the ashes of despair, a spirit of resilience emerged. People helped each other. Communities came together. Neighbors shared what little they had, and mutual aid societies sprang up to provide support. And the government, under the leadership of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, took unprecedented steps to alleviate the suffering and put the nation back on track. The New Deal programs aimed to provide relief, recovery, and reform. The story of the Great Depression is a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of what can happen when economic systems fail and social safety nets are inadequate. It underscores the fragility of economic systems and the importance of having robust mechanisms in place to protect the most vulnerable in society. But it is also a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity. In the face of unimaginable hardship, people found the strength to rebuild their lives and their communities, proving that even in the darkest times, hope and resilience can prevail. The 1920s, often referred to as the Roaring Twenties, were a time of great economic prosperity in the United States. The First World War was over. The nation was at peace, and the economy was booming. New technologies, such as the automobile and the radio, were transforming society. Mass production techniques made goods more affordable, and easy credit allowed consumers to buy now and pay later. The stock market became a symbol of this newfound prosperity. Stock prices soared to unprecedented heights. Investors, both large and small, poured their money into the market, hoping to get rich quick. But beneath the surface of this economic boom, there were warning signs. Income inequality was widening, farmers were struggling, and many industries were overproducing. The seeds of crisis were being sown. The easy credit that fueled the consumer boom also led to excessive borrowing and speculation. Stock prices were driven up by hype and optimism, rather than by actual company earnings. This created a bubble, an unsustainable situation where asset prices were far higher than their intrinsic value. When the bubble burst, the consequences would be catastrophic. October 29th, 1929. A day that will forever be etched in the annals of history as Black Tuesday. It was on this fateful day that the stock market crashed, marking the beginning of the Great Depression. The crash was the culmination of a series of events that had been building up for months. Overvalued stocks, fueled by speculation and margin buying, began to decline in September 1929. The declines turned into a panic in late October. On Black Tuesday, investors, gripped by fear, rushed to sell their stocks at any price. Millions of shares were traded, but there were few buyers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, a key indicator of stock market performance, plummeted by almost 13% on that single day. It was the largest one-day percentage drop in U.S. history. The crash sent shockwaves throughout the financial system. Banks that had invested heavily in the stock market suffered huge losses. Businesses went bankrupt, and consumers lost confidence in the economy. The Roaring Twenties were over. Section 4. The Unraveling, from Wall Street to Main Street. The stock market crash of 1929 was not the sole cause of the Great Depression, but it was the catalyst that set in motion a chain reaction of events that would cripple the global economy. The crash, often referred to as Black Tuesday, saw the collapse of stock prices, wiping out thousands of investors and leading to a loss of confidence in the financial system. The crash exposed the underlying weaknesses in the U.S. economy. These weaknesses included overproduction in factories, an agricultural sector already in distress, and a banking system that was not prepared for such a shock. It also had a devastating ripple effect that spread rapidly throughout the world. Countries that were heavily dependent on American loans and trade found themselves in dire straits as the U.S. economy faltered. The crash led to a sharp decline in consumer spending. People, fearful of the future, began to save whatever money they had left, further reducing the demand for goods and services. Businesses, faced with falling demand, were forced to cut production and lay off workers. Factories that once buzzed with activity fell silent, and unemployment rates soared to unprecedented levels. This led to a vicious cycle of declining demand, job losses, and further economic contraction. As more people lost their jobs, they had even less money to spend, which in turn led to more businesses failing. Banks, already weakened by the stock market crash, began to fail at alarming rates. Depositors lost their savings, and the banking system, which was the backbone of the economy, started to crumble. And credit dried up, making it even harder for businesses to operate. Without access to loans, companies couldn't invest in new projects or even maintain their current operations. The U.S. economy was also burdened by structural problems. These included income inequality, where the wealth was concentrated in the hands of a few, and a lack of diversification in the economy. The agricultural sector, a key part of the economy, had been struggling for years due to overproduction and falling crop prices. Farmers were unable to sell their produce at profitable prices, leading to widespread poverty in rural areas. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930, which raised tariffs on imported goods, backfired and exacerbated the global economic downturn. Instead of protecting American jobs, it led to a trade war, with other countries imposing their own tariffs, further stifling international trade and deepening the depression. Section 5. Bank Failures and the Dust Bowl, a Nation in Despair. The early years of the Great Depression were marked by a sense of despair and hopelessness. The stock market crash of 1929 had sent shockwaves through the nation, leading to widespread economic turmoil. Bank failures became a common occurrence, shaking the very foundation of the financial system. Between 1929 and 1933, over 9,000 banks failed in the United States. This unprecedented wave of bank closures left countless Americans in financial ruin. These failures had a devastating impact on the economy, causing a ripple effect that was felt in every corner of the country. Depositors lost their life savings, their dreams of financial security shattered in an instant. Businesses, too, were not spared. They lost their lines of credit, making it nearly impossible to continue operations. And the money supply contracted, further depressing economic activity. With less money in circulation, consumer spending plummeted, leading to widespread unemployment and poverty. As if the economic crisis wasn't enough, a natural disaster struck the American heartland, compounding the nation's woes. The Dust Bowl, a period of severe dust storms that ravaged the Great Plains, added to the misery of the Great Depression. These storms were not just a natural phenomenon. They were a result of years of environmental mismanagement. Years of drought and unsustainable farming practices had left the topsoil dry and exposed. Farmers had plowed the land extensively, removing the natural grasses that held the soil in place. When strong winds swept across the plains, they carried away millions of tons of topsoil, creating massive dust storms that blotted out the sun and choked everything in their path. These storms turned day into night and made breathing difficult. The Dust Bowl devastated agriculture in the affected regions. Crops failed, leaving fields barren and unproductive. Livestock died from the dust and lack of food, and farmers, unable to make a living, were forced to abandon their homes and seek opportunities elsewhere. Entire communities were uprooted, their way of life destroyed. Many of these displaced farmers, known as Okies, headed west to California, hoping to find work and a better life. However, they were met with harsh realities. Jobs were scarce, and living conditions were often just as bad as those they had left behind. The promise of prosperity in California turned out to be an illusion for many. Migrant camps sprang up across California, filled with families struggling to survive. These camps were overcrowded and lacked basic amenities, making life incredibly difficult for the new arrivals. The federal government eventually intervened, implementing programs to provide relief and support to those affected by the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl. Agencies like the Works Progress Administration and the Civilian Conservation Corps offered jobs and hope to millions. Despite the overwhelming challenges, the resilience and determination of the American people shone through. Communities banded together, and individuals found ways to adapt and survive. The road to recovery was long and arduous, but it was a testament to the enduring spirit of a nation in despair.